I'm a real working professional. I have a team of talented professionals around me, and we co-work on many projects. So the title's fancy, but it's a real job.
So I can call you a working professional, not on street corners.
Whoa!
That means something different with the Foundry crew, Perry, but among friends, I think that'll work. This is off to a bang-up start, by the way. I love it.
Yeah. And
You're listening to the Foundry Talk podcast with your hosts, Nate McLean and Perry Merritt. Take it away, boys.
Well, welcome back. My name is Perry. As always, I have my partner, Nate, from KN Manufacturing. And with us today, we have Jerrod Weaver, Executive Director at the Non-Ferrous Founders Society. Jerrod has been around before. He was our very first podcast guest. We had a great time with Jerrod and wanted to have him back. And there were a lot of things that we left on the table that we needed to get covered this time. So we asked Jerrod to come back. He graciously agreed. Jerrod, how are you, brother? How are things been going? And tell us what's going on at the Non-Ferrous Founders Society, NFFS.
Great. Hi, Perry. Hi, Nate. Thanks for having me back. I'm not sure who you gentlemen offended so deeply that you have to bring me back so soon, but it's my pleasure to be here and speak with you both.
All of them, just so you know, all of them.
Well, it sounds about on par. We're having a great spring. Looking forward to summer coming up here, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about some of the new things we have going on that I think is going to benefit a tremendous amount of foundries in the industry and help with a lot of different things. I'll jump right in. I think the first thing that is new for the society, we've always been a management oriented organization, so we help primarily with business development for foundries, and we do occupational safety and health compliance, environmental compliance. We do government affairs, but more of the management level stuff, but we never really got too technical. There were other organizations that did a lot of technical programming for the industry. But, the world evolves, and there's a real need for some investigation and R&D into copper, nickel, aluminum, bronze alloys specifically. The Navy has a huge need. We're seeing some feedback that those alloys can be problematic. Any practicing foundry guy in the copper space is well aware of the problems related to those alloys. So we at the Society are actually establishing a technical division. This is going to be brand new. We're going to launch it on or about July 1st. We'll have a real operating committee. We've got about 2 technical projects lined up. The first one's going to just be a reject rate reduction program, and we're going to be looking at nickel, aluminum, bronze, and copper nickel alloys and figuring out root causes, some problems, and bringing technical solutions to foundries to try and elevate the game of all U.S. foundries. I don't have to tell you, with the tariffs and the plan to reshore domestic production, that we're going to need a tremendous industrial footprint in this country to build out the stuff we need in the future, and foundries are the cornerstone of that. And that's why we're excited to open up the technical division to make our existing foundries and new entrants to the market to be even more efficient and more profitable. So we're really excited about that.
So how are you actually doing that? I mean, are you good? Are you doing something in-house? Are you going out to foundries to do this technical stuff? Are you working with some kind of partner or lab or something? How are you guys doing this kind of stuff?
Well, it's not all contracted out yet, but we have been approached by partners in the industry. The U.S. Navy has issues in this area, and there's other partners in the defense industrial base that report, high rates of rejections for copper, nickel, aluminum, bronze castings specifically. So, our effort's going to be central, working to help those customers reduce their reject rates with the plan to help accelerate and build some velocity behind some of the build programs that they're looking at. So, we're standing up. We're going to hire a full-time technical director. I think it'll raise a few eyebrows when we announce who that is, but he's a well-respected professional. And then we'll have a technical team of the leading technical guys from the secondary smelters, a couple of our member foundries with experience in those materials and R&D efforts. And we're going to build it from the ground up. We need it in the industry. Customers say they need it, and no longer can we cede that to other organizations. If we're going to lead, we need to lead from the front, and that's the plan of our board of directors and our executive committee, and we're super excited to get rolling.
Yeah, time for awesome. Look at that. Yeah, it sounds great. When are you what's your goal? I mean, are you trying to get out this summer, this fall? What's the goal?
Oh, well, we're a very small organization, but we're nimble and we're agile. We move fast, man. We're
So next
expecting,
week?
we've turned around projects in a week, Perry. That doesn't intimidate my team at all. I would expect to see some announcement on this in early July, and we'll at least see some phase one data, I would say by early next year.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Yep.
That's pretty remarkable.
Is going to make a huge impact for firms that pour those class of alloys, just to have some professional expertise and guidance to, lower scrap rates, rejects at the machining stage, need for rework and late deliveries, like all that goes away if we can just get some processing. And I think what's interesting is the whole plan is to benchmark and engage with both the Brits and the Aussies. They're real good friends of the U.S., and their industries report much lower rejections in those alloy families that we do here in the U.S. So we're going to plan to talk with our friends and learn what they've learned and try and apply some of that knowledge, the tribal knowledge, if you will, back here in the U.S. and make everybody better.
So is it unfair? Is it unfair for me to ask what kinds of rejections are we talking about here? Are they talking about pouring defects? Are you talking about material defects? Are you talking what or is it just kind of all over the map right now?
Well, I think that's going to be one stage of the technical effort, right? We hear about reports of high reject rates at machining. We also hear some noise about leakers. Both may be true. It may be a spectrum of different issues. So that's one of the first things to do to solve any problem is identify what the problem actually is. So we're going to do some analysis from the shipyards and the OEMs, figure out what the rejects actually are. Because we all know sometimes, not hating on machine shops, but sometimes they'll screw things up during first article or setup and then blame it on foundry scrap. I know this is breaking open industry secrets here, but we need to have an accurate picture. Right, Nate, I know. It's crazy. But I've heard rumors that's happened in the past.
It's bound to be just rumors, I'm sure. Those guys are all perfect.
Yeah, I mean, everybody aspires to be as good as our local machine shop is. But the fact is, in order to fix anything, you got to know what the problem is. So we'll do a data analysis phase, figure out what the biggest cause of rejects and late deliveries are, and then we're going to focus our limited resources on the areas where we can get the biggest return on our investment, just like Nate would do in his private operating foundry. You have to be strategic, and so that's the plan for now, Perry. More to come. If you're unfortunate enough to get stuck with me for another discussion, I'll give you an update.
Well, we hope so. We hope this turns into an ongoing theme throughout the years.
I
because
would
I think
hope
it's
you
super
gentlemen
important.
improve your behavior and not get stuck with me in the future, but I'm happy to be here, like I said.
Hey, birds of a feather, Jerrod. Birds of a feather, my man.
That's why we get along so well.
Is that the takes one to know one comment? Is that the
No, it's all good. Well, that's super exciting, especially for a new committee. That's going to be, that's going to be fun. I can't wait to see what happens with that, especially for the nickel, aluminum, bronze, and those are some pretty nasty alloys. They're really difficult to pour. You got to do it properly, and some of those alloys are fast freezing and they have a high propensity for oxidation. More than likely, shrink and oxidation is probably the main defects that they're running into. Depending on how they're engineered and rigged, for sure.
Yeah.
So it'll be exciting to see, especially with the Brits and the Aussies getting in there to help and share some of that tribal knowledge, because that's super, super important. I mean, and a lot of times people, they hold their cards so close to their chest they don't want anybody to know. But how does the human race forget all of the countries and all the borders and all this other stuff? Go, how do we get better as a human race and help one another? It really kind of the warring and all the other stuff that goes along with all of that drives me crazy, because I mean, we're all humans, so we don't need to go and fight and kill and that sort of thing. I mean, we can progress ourselves way faster if we all work together. So that's awesome and encouraging to hear that.
Mm-hmm. I think it bespeaks the brotherhood that's common among foundry men as well. Like I've met foundrymen from countries all over the world, and we automatically have something in common. And I kind of understand you as a man when you work in that environment and with that process of metal, because we have a shared experience. And so, yeah, they might be allies and brothers from another country, but they're still foundrymen, and maybe that makes them even more important to talk to.
I agree. Wholehearted. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, so you guys already have all that stuff already lined out with as far as the committee and all of that sort of stuff, or are you looking for other people to volunteer and to dig in?
Oh man, we're always looking to engage with smart people, right? We have a lot of people smarter than me working on that committee. We'll be forming up our first committee meeting actually next week. So anybody that's interested in serving in a technical capacity, please reach out to me or one of my team at the Non-Ferrous Founders Society. It's nffs.org. And we'd be happy to talk with you and invite you to come and investigate. And by the way, we're lining up an initial technical project with the U.S. Navy. We talked about it briefly, but this isn't going to be your grandfather's R&D, right? The stuff that we're talking about coming out is going to be real, actionable production adjustments and decision points that can be applied into the foundry. And this is going to be open source stuff, right? Like, I've been around for years. You've been around for years. We've seen tons of R&D that doesn't necessarily get deployed to industry. And I think that's one of the plans that our board of directors has been very clear on. Is it's great to have technical R&D, but you have to have a plan to deploy the technology. And so we're really good at deploying stuff out to foundries, as you know. So I think this is going to be something a little different than people are used to. And we're looking at aluminum alloys too. So don't let my shiny metal brethren feel excluded here.
I love it. That is awesome. I'm excited about that. That's going to be huge. And a lot of times, what you find is a lot of these committees. It's all about, they get together and they talk and they kind of brainstorm and all this stuff. But then there's no real action that you really see. It's just a white paper. Hey, we published this, and hey, look at this, and we get up on the podium and on the stage and we talk about it and that sort of thing. And you're like, so that was a complete waste of my time. What are you doing with it?
Mhm.
Nothing. We wrote a paper. Okay, it's too slick for me to wipe my backside with. So what are we going to do? So that's super encouraging that you guys are doing some actionable type things, because those alloys, they are tough. They're really tough. And once you figure it out, I mean, I get people, they'll ask questions quite often, about those particular alloys, and you do certain things. Once you figure out what you need to do, you can be successful with it. But you break some of the rules, you're going to make some really crappy castings.
Dave, you mentioned a phrase, something that is kind of near and dear to my heart as a software guy. You mentioned open source, right? And I was around in software development when the open source movement took off, and
One of those pesky Linux guys.
Linux, yes. Linus even called it Linux, just so you know.
He is a software dweeb, isn't he?
I know he's a dork, but it was funny. They struggled. The Free Software Foundation and these guys, they struggled to get traction because companies had this idea that, well, all of our software is proprietary. Any knowledge that we've gained is proprietary, and we can't share that with anybody. And that was sort of at a higher level in the company. The developers all knew better. The developers knew that the guys working at that other place and that place over there were doing almost exactly the same thing. They were solving the same kind of problems, and they were coming up with solutions that were very, very similar. And at a high level within the company, the management teams refused to accept that, and even today, they try to write in non-compete clauses for developers. If you work here, you can't ever go work in another place in the same
Right.
industry. Well, baloney, right? I mean, that's where they go. They go where they know what they're doing, and you find out every place you're going to is doing the exact same work essentially. How is it in the foundry world? I mean, are guys? I'm getting the impression from the plethora of podcasts that we've done so far that it doesn't seem to be quite that way. It seems to be more open, more willing to help the next guy out, more willing to share information. Is that true, or do you see the same kinds of problems in the foundry as this industry that I saw in the software business?
Nate, you have a foundry. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, you have friendly competition amongst yourselves. I mean, whether it's ferrous or non-ferrous, and I have not found it to be closed source at all. To quite frankly, matter of fact, we're working on some projects where it's actually three foundries that are actually working together. A foundry in Louisiana and two foundries in Texas, collaborating with one another, and we're doing the engineering and we're doing the all the solidification and flow analysis, and we're kind of marrying everything together for the foundry in Louisiana. And so I have not ever found it to where somebody won't be forthcoming with some sort of help of some sort. Now that you do get run into the situation where some people, they have a certain way of doing certain things, and they'll answer usually the foundry technical questions or the foundry 101 type stuff. You don't have a problem in that regard. Where you start to run into issues is when they've got a proprietary process. Let's say that it's for DoD or something along those lines, and they're ITAR certified and some things of that nature, where they really have to protect the intellectual properties of their customers and that sort of thing. I have never seen anybody cross the line in that regard. But when it comes to, hey man, I'm pouring this job and it's got a water jacket in it and I'm getting core blow and I can't seem to make this freaking job. I'm pulling my hair out. I've poured it 30 times and I've lost it 29 times. And I've never had anybody say, well, good luck with that, man. I hope you can get it worked out. I've never had that happen. Usually it's always like, well, what have you tried? What kind of sand are you using? Okay, what are you doing for venting? And if they're close enough to you, I've went and I've helped people. Hey man, show me how you're putting your reinforcement wires in your cores. What are you doing to vent the cores, and what sand are you using? Have we checked your LOI? All those type of things, and you start working through that stuff. And most of the time, whenever you're getting help from these other foundries, to be quite frank, they're just going back to foundry fundamentals, the foundry 101, and all of the stuff that we do, that sometimes we get so embedded and so in depth into the forest that we can't see the trees. And so it's good to have a coach or mentor or somebody that you trust that's been they may not even be a coach or mentor. They just may be a buddy that you have a beer with at an AFS meeting or a NFFS meeting or something along those lines. You network with those people and you grow it as a community in the foundry industry. I've never had anybody just completely say, pat you on the back, say, well, wish you well, let me know how it goes. It's never been the case. I mean, I've physically helped other people with jobs that were alloys that technically, I mean, that's the alloy. We pour those alloys all the time. Oh, they need some help. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter in the grand scheme. There's enough work in the foundry industry for all of us. Not any one of us or not any 100 of us can do 100% of all of the work that's out there. So it's really a moot point. So therefore, the band of brothers, in my regard, and the way that I think about it is, man, if they need some help, and like the first time that the Jerrod was on, he told the story about the guy that had a motor go out and somebody else drove a motor down and helped him get it wired up and got him back online. And they may have been friendly competition. It's just what you do. So in that regard, I mean, as an example, I had some guys actually here at KN or at Pumpworks Castings at the time, late last year. I think it was, I don't know, 1st of December, middle of December, something like that, before we purchased this place. I swung in, checking out some stuff there. Hey, I think they were giving me a hard time or needling me. It's like, hey, the foundry expert's here. Let's talk to you about this problem we've got. And I'm like, what do you guys got? So we started looking at it and walked through it and had them walk me through what they were doing. I was like, okay, so guys, this is what I would do. And we walked through it and asked them, hey, do you got any, where's your wire for reinforcement? And we're not putting wire in it. Okay, well, that's part of it. Let's start there. So let's bend the wire. Let's get the wire in there the way it needs to go. How are you guys venting the core if you're not putting any wire in there? And they kind of looked at me like, well, we're not venting the core. So I said, okay, I bet you when you pour this job, when you guys are pouring this, the metal's coming up around that core. And I said, you have no venting in here. And I said, I bet you that you're getting core blow coming off there, and it's boiling inside the mold. I said, where's one of the defective castings? We went and looked at it. Sure enough, you could see exactly where the core blow was at. It was sticking to the coat surface of the mold. It's like, okay, guys, we got to get the core gas out of there because you're killing yourself. So we went and we walked back through it. Sure enough, I said, well, where's your text vent at so we can get the core gas out of there? They all kind of looked at it. We don't know what text vent is. What are you talking about? So I showed them a picture of it. I pulled up online, looked at it. They said, oh, yeah, we've seen that. We don't have any of that for this. I was like, okay, no problem. So I said, run to Lowe's and get some jute rope or get some burlap or something, some cord. And they were looking at me like, this guy's insane. This isn't going to work. I could just tell on their faces. They were like, this guy's a moron. So they got it. They brought it back, showed them what to do. We wrapped that jute rope on there. We made the cores. We embedded that in there. They run the process. Well, I couldn't be here when they were pouring it because they were pouring it. I think it was on a Friday. They were pouring it on a Monday. So I called, check on them. Guess what? Core didn't break. Core didn't blow. Casting was perfect. It was just a simple thing. And when they stopped to think about it, they're like, yeah, that's pretty easy. We can do that. So they did, and they got the order processed and ran. But they had run quite a few of them, and they were just not successful. It's a lot of times it's just the simple things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I can go on a rant for a second. Have you ever talked to a bellcaster, Nate?
Yeah. It's very
They're a different
secretive. They've
breed.
got pixie dust and voodoo that they toss in the
Yeah.
metal. I
They're
don't
a
know
different
what the
breed.
what
They're
the
not-
alloy is, but
They don't want to share any information. It's a black art.
You know what
But-
Nate communicates is true, and I've seen that 100 times in the industry of one foundry willing to help another, even if they're competing on similar work. There's the band of brothers that Nate used. I think that's very adept description of the industry in some ways.
So, you were just talking about this band of brothers and stuff. I'm curious about the fact, and before we started when we were talking, Jerrod, you mentioned the idea of buying a foundry, right? Is it because foundries are struggling? Is it because foundries are fewer and fewer of them out there? What's the reason for being this kind of band of brothers? Or is it just because, hey, we work our butts off, we know you work your butts off, and we're kindred spirits because of it?
I think there's a definite part of that, right? That's why platoons in the Army are so tight knit. It's the shared experience. It's that sense of community. I struggled and you struggled next to me. We have that shared commonality. So we might be different people, but we understand one another at that level. And I'm sure the same is true for other industries. I don't know. I love and live in the foundry industry, but I see it all the time. I see it in teams, in individual foundries. And like I said, you go to trade shows like the Casting Congress or something like that, you can bump into a guy you have no idea in the world, but he's a foreman and you're a foreman. Now we know one another, and it's something that people bond over, right? And some of my best friends in the world I've made working in this industry. It's that commonality of interest, right? You obviously have some interest in metals and in industrial practice. So there's a whole lot of things that come together and converge into some really meaningful relationships, and it's beyond competitor, I think.
It's got to be, I don't know, there's got to be something in common with the work itself, because again, I'll go back to my dork background, being a software guy. I never felt that kinship with other developers, right? Yeah, okay, we're developers, but there was never this sort of bonding that came because of our job, because of the kind of work we did. But I hear this stuff in the foundry world. I hear it all the time right now. I'm hearing it that these guys are helping each other out. They're good. They understand each other. They're building. There's got to be something about the work itself involved here, or maybe it's, I don't know. There's something different happening in a foundry world than in other industries.
I'll go out on a limb here and I'll throw you an idea. I'm sure Nate will correct me because it's absolutely wrong. But I think that, foundry work isn't for everybody. right? Where, there's a certain kind of man or woman that has a love for industrial process and heavy machinery and seeing real things get made from recycled materials like that. That's kind of a personality trait, like what you're interested in, right? You don't see a lot of computer nerds, with all due respect, walking around the foundry. We have a lot of computers there, but you're typically in the foundry because you have love for metal or the processing. You see the molten metal flowing, which is where most people get started, right? So I think that you automatically have some commonality of interest and experience. And let's face it, this isn't the world's largest industry either. So if you meet another fellow solidification engineer, you're about one of maybe 200 in the world that are really know
Right,
what they're
right.
doing. And so there's camaraderie in just being a selective few. It's like the
That
Marines,
may that may be
the
a big
proud, the
part of it.
brave, right?
Yeah, that may be a big part of it because, you know, when I worked in an industry, you were one of 2,000,000 or 2,000,000,000 or whatever, right? I mean, it wasn't one of 200. And
Mhm.
so there wasn't that sort of shared, and it's almost, I guess I could see where if you are part of a small group, there's always that sort of shared experience and surviving it and prospering in it and whatever. Whereas when you're in a big group, you just kind of get lost. So that's an interesting point. If Nate argues with you, I'll stand on your side here.
Well,
Well, no, he's 100%. He's
appreciate that.
100% accurate. I think it makes a big difference. I mean, and that's what's so important about the trade associations, the NIFs, and that sort of thing. When you can get together and you can have a social and you can get. I mean, because and I think NIFs is doing a great job in that regard because a lot of times, you can have monthly meetings and go through the motions and all that other stuff, but really what you're looking for is you're looking for networking, you're looking for brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever, and in the foundry industry, and that makes a huge difference. I mean, just getting together and having a cold beer and or having a meal together, and maybe even a round table, and hey, this is the topic, and hey, I'm struggling with this, or how do you guys handling this with employees or employee retention, and because a lot of times you get so in the trenches and you're in it all the time as a small business because most of us are small businesses. Most of us don't have hundreds or thousands of employees. So therefore, you don't have all the resources that a large corporation that has 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 employees has. Sometimes you have to take this hat off and put this other hat on, and you're the HR guy and you're the safety guy and
Yeah.
all these other things. And next thing you know, you're dealing with material review board because you've got quality issues or this happened or that happened, and you're trying to coach and mentor your team. So it's always good to get together with other foundry people so that you can kind of pump each other up. Hey, how's everything going? Sometimes you just need a pep talk. Sometimes you'll walk yourself back from the ledge because you're ready to rip somebody's head off, but that's not constructive and it doesn't really work well, right? So, just checking on your fellow foundryman a lot of times is just kind of being a good human. And that's where I would definitely give kudos to NIFs, getting people together, getting the committees together. Just like when we talked to Chris Greenfield, a couple of podcasts ago. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, I guarantee you, if I was to send Chris an email or anybody for that matter, and ask him a question about something, he's going to respond. I guarantee you, it's in his DNA. He loves the industry. He loves the work that we do. If he can answer it, he'll answer it. If not, he'll send you to the person that on their team that can get you the information that you need. So it's like that across the board, and I think that it is a band of brothers in my opinion.
I know you guys only do one annual event a year. I mean, get together a year, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, we do one annual conference, but we're really trying to get local, right? So we'll do a spring and a fall regional event in areas where we can try and get people together. And they're just, we'll get together, we'll do a plant tour, and then we'll go and do something fun that evening. Let people get a couple cocktails and a couple meals. Again, no speakers, not trying to bore them with something. Just give you an opportunity to have a little bit of food and talk to your colleagues in the industry and hear how things are going and talk shop and just maintain those networks. I mean, those are so important. Foundry works hard. I guess all jobs are hard, especially in manufacturing. But time and again, you ask people, why do you do what you do? And I love this stuff, but I love the people I work with is almost always the number one answer. And I think that's touching on what we're talking about here is that there's a sense of being a colleague and a teammate and seeing something physically manifest itself from an idea and a blueprint, and we convert raw materials from the ground into something that has value that people will pay us for our time so we can support our families. I think that's a powerful driver, and I just, it's like here, you three gentlemen, the three of us on the same podcast, I feel like we have something in common here because we both like to talk about a lot of things. So I think it's powerful, and I think that's a role of the associations, and regional events are great. The national stuff is great. Just hopping on conference calls, right, or getting on a webinar. Forget who the speaker is, but the Q&A portion, the last 10 minutes of almost any webinar is always my favorite because I get to engage with people. I get to hear other people's questions, and there's often commonality. So it's just you got to talk, man. No man's an island unto himself, right?
I think the last time we talked too, you were talking about, I remember you talking about getting local and doing things, and you even made the comment about, we're right here and I can't be going all over the place. But are you guys going out? Do you have events that are, or not events, that's the wrong term. You talk about these local things.
Yeah, sure.
Are you doing something in Houston? Are you doing something down, in Lufkin?
Yeah, well, not right now, but we're working on it. I've got a note here to get down to Texas. We've got a fair number of foundries down in that part of the world, and we're coming. Our next event is actually going to be in Cleveland. This will be in August, and what we're doing is Industry Day at Cedar Point. If you're not familiar with Cedar Point, it's like a Six Flags. It's a giant amusement park. It's the roller coaster capital of the world, as a matter of fact. So August 9th, I think, is the date. I might have that wrong, but it's that second Saturday in August. We're trying to pull together a couple hundred foundry men and their families to come to Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. We'll have, access to the tickets. We're going to have a pavilion with hot dogs where you can bring your family and meet your friend's family, and their kids can ride together. So we're trying to build this out. We're working with Kent State University on possibly trying to do an iron pour, or not an iron pour, but to do a tin pour at the park to kind of demonstrate some foundry technology, maybe bring in the foundry in a box. So we're still in negotiations on that, but if you're in the upper Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, maybe Pennsylvania on the western side, drive on over, come see us in Sandusky. Tickets are available on the NFFS website. So that's an example. No speakers, right? This isn't really a foundry event. This is an event for industry workers and their families. Let's just come out and have some fun together on a Saturday and go ride some roller coasters.
Yeah, it's almost like a recognition kind of event,
It's
just appreciation event or a
so much of
bonding
what,
event.
yeah, so much of what we've done has been focused on helping HR with develop talent pipelines, right? And helping the quality departments implement ISO 9000 and TS 16949, AS 9100, right? Helping our sales forces in the foundries with our ICON program to connect with business opportunities with the Defense Department. But we don't really get a chance to talk much beyond those initial layers in the foundry office. And so I say we're trying to get local. I think we're trying to get small, right? We're trying to engage with the people that make the molds and melt the metal and degate the castings as much as we're talking to the people in the front office. So we're trying some things. We don't have it all figured out, but everybody loves roller coasters and everybody likes hot dogs, and we're going to have lots of both. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But then we'll get back into business next October. We're going to be going to Pittsburgh. We'll do a plant tour up through Harmony Castings. They've got a V process foundry. Not a lot of people have seen or are familiar with V process. So we'll do a plant tour, and then we're going to go and we'll do a boozy mini golf tournament right there in downtown Pittsburgh. So if you've never had fun, there's nothing like, 40 foundry men and women sitting around drinking cocktails, pretending like they know how to golf. So that'll be a hoot.
February. Awesome. And Cedar Point is on the 23rd of August.
All right.
So just so we're giving them good information. So 23rd.
Great. Well, You're doing better than I am, Nate. I just know that I need to show up. Somebody will tell me then. But
Yep, 100%.
we got October, February. We're going to Puerto Rico for our, I think it's our 78th annual meeting of the society. Puerto Rico is a really interesting. A lot of people are initially skeptical of the location, but the room rates are, $200 cheaper than they are in Florida
Yeah.
at the same time of year. You can get direct flights down there, and it's just a really beautiful location to do some serious business. So we're looking forward to that in February. We just got done with our event in Chicago about 2 weeks ago. We had about 40 of our favorite friends join us in Schaumburg, and we went to medieval times and watched the knights, do sword play and jousting, and just kind of had some fun. Chance to network and connect with people on a regional basis. So people seem to enjoy
Did
that.
your knight win?
No,
Did your knight win?
no, we were represented by the yellow and green knight, and he was only defeated due to the treachery of the red knight, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep.
I bet he
That's
knew it
fun.
was coming though.
Yeah, well, he was a close.
Well, that's
You didn't yell loud enough.
yeah.
I'm sure that was not the case. Interesting enough, one of our members, Tad Olson of Olson Aluminum Castings, you may know him, Nate. He was actually knighted as a Knight of the Realm. I've got it on video. It's available on our YouTube channel. It's just a lot of
Nice.
fun to send Tad a link and say, "Hey, I saw you on this." He's got a smile from ear to ear. It's one of the things I love best about this job is just seeing people relax and have some fun. It's great.
Yeah, let their hair down. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 100% business all the time. I mean, you got to kind of we spend so many hours doing this. Sometimes you just need to have a little bit of fun, and that's exciting. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And the industry mixer things are always fun because a lot of times you get to talk with a man or woman that's your direct counterpart in another business or a supplier. But the industry events give our members a chance to bring their spouses, right? And to be seen as a couple and meet other couples, and those spouses have developed relationships. And so it gives a chance for foundry professionals to kind of brag and flex a little bit. They're proud of what they do, and they should be. And so, their spouses tend to come to those events and really enjoy them as well. Sometimes they're driving the decision to attend more than the guys from the foundry are.
Sure. No, that's incredible. That's awesome. So, and with all of the political stuff going on and the tariffs and all that sort of stuff, governmental affairs is always kind of near and dear to my heart. I mean, I've been to DC, I don't know how many times, and lobby, of course, and that's coming up again in the second week in June, I think 10th and 11th.
Sure.
It's one of those things where in the past I felt like it depends on what the political climate is like. I felt like, man, we just completely wasted our time. But then a few months later, or maybe the following year, something happens with what we actually went there to talk about. It's like, okay, well, maybe it didn't fall on deaf ears, and then sometimes you don't get to interface with the congressman or the senator when you're there. But I've almost found that it's almost better to talk to the staff, because those are the people that are doing everything. The congressman and senator, they're just one individual, right? They're not the ones that are actually doing the work. So it's pretty exciting to be able to do that. Although it is nice to be able to interface with those individuals, but it's not necessarily the main theme, so to speak. It's really just to get our point across. Hey guys, don't forget about us out in the trenches. We're out here trying to kill it. We're trying to produce payroll, and we're paying property taxes. We're paying income taxes, all that sort of stuff. So we need as much help as we can get with everything that we're trying to do. Don't handicap us. And these are some of the things that we're fighting for, and we need some assistance, or at least give us a level playing field, so we're not fighting with one hand behind our back. Not that we can't win at that, but it makes it a little bit more difficult. Are you guys seeing a lot of traction in that regard with NIFs?
So, we're engaged on government affairs. In fact, it's one of the three pillars that we build our long range strategic plan was advocacy for the industry. I mean, you can walk into any bar on a given Thursday night, right? Maybe there's 100 people in there, and you do a survey in the room. How many of you know what a ferrous or a non-ferrous foundry is? And I'll bet you maybe you get 5 to 10% of people that actually have any idea what you're talking about. 90%, therefore, wouldn't. And I used to be disillusioned in my youth. Maybe I'm a little bit older and wiser now, but I don't know that the congressional population is all that much different than the general population. I'm guessing that most of them are not intimately familiar with foundries and how important they are, the role that they play in the U.S. economy. They may have heard of them, but I doubt very many of them actually understand us. And that's the value of an association, is you can provide collective comments and education off to those legislators and regulators that maybe is taken a little bit more seriously as a national trade association versus an individual company. Personal contact with your independent and individual legislator is vitally important. I'm not minimizing that, but I think when you're trying to set policy and direction for an industry, the collective voice is oftentimes more powerful than a collection of individual voices, if you take my saying. Right. To point, I think we've seen some very positive developments legislatively lately. I think one of the things that I'm interested to see how it plays out is the administration's ban on new regulations, right? If you're going to issue a new regulation, you got to drop two old ones. And I think that that's frozen many of the pending regulations, such as the OSHA heat injury and illness rule, right? I know that they're doing another informal public hearing on the rule, so they're still making lip service to it. Their interest in actually promulgating that standard, I think, is going to come in conflict with the EO. So that's something we're tracking very closely. There's some threatened changes to the Clean Air Act and the MAX standards on the EPA side. I think that's something that people need to be tracking. We're certainly tracking it at the committee level. So it's very much a wait and see what's on the environment, because you still hear about an awful lot of scary things, but then you hear positive stuff, like maybe some potential changes to the amortization and the EBITDA tax standard for deductibility, right? That would all be very positive for foundries. So we'll continue to advocate for that, but just because we have what's perceived as a more business friendly administration, I'm not sure, that you can afford to take your eye off of the ball. And that's the power of associations. You have somebody watching your back so you can run your foundry.
And it's super helpful too. I mean, it's you get concerned about it, but then you get so busy on your day-to-day stuff. So it's super helpful, and I can't speak highly enough about the work that's being done in that regard, especially with, even Stephanie and some of those guys, Barbara and all those people with the fly-in and things of that nature, that with AFS, it's the government affairs fly-in, I think is just a vital part of what's going on. And same thing with NIFs. I know you guys, more than likely, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that there's some crossover there with some of you guys with making sure that everybody's on the same page and collaborating in that regard, just like us foundries do, and collectively, it's so vital for us to stay on top of that stuff. There's so many good business people in the foundry industry that have the skills to actually communicate well and collaborate and make sure that our voices are heard. But a lot of times they just kind of throw their hands in the air and go, "What in the world can I do? I can't do anything to help." But it does affect it big time. So.
But I want to go back to something Jerrod was just saying. You talk about these standards, and if you adopt, I think you said if you adopt one standard, you got to get rid of two or something like that, two old ones. Is that a positive thing in the industry, or is that a negative thing in the industry? Is that if I get rid of, or are we talking regulations versus standards? What's going on there? Because I'm not tracking that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious.
Well, I don't claim to speak for everybody, but broadly speaking, for our industry, I think if you took a census, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? No one particular regulation necessarily is ever going to kill a company just based on the individual costs. I think what happens is you have a compounding of responsibilities and expenses and administrative controls over thousands of regulations that becomes unwieldy, and honestly, it makes U.S. foundries uncompetitive against foundries that are in other countries that are maybe a little less regulated. So broadly speaking, I think a reduction in the number of regulations, if they're targeted, right? If it's just the crazy approach like we've taken with taxes, or I'm sorry, tariffs, maybe I'm not such a fan of just going willy-nilly with that. But if we make targeted reductions into the things that are actually barriers to being productive manufacturing, I think that would be a net win for industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I mean, typically, I think I just feel like regulations have been overused. And I think we had a conversation not too long ago about a regulation about heat and
Right.
people working in heat, right? That was designed for people working on asphalt, doing road work. And it's been moved over into the foundry industry. It's like, well, there was really no correlation here, but this regulation was approved here and just got moved into other places. And, I think, well, getting rid of some of that stuff might not be a bad thing, but then there's also, obviously there's stuff that, and we've had this conversation as well, keeping employees safe. I was surprised to learn, actually I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was a little bit surprised that the consensus in this conversation we were in was that foundry owners really do care about their employees, and foundry owners really do want to keep them safe. They don't want them getting hurt. And I get it, right? I mean, hurt employees don't do anybody any good, but it was beyond a dollars and cents thing. It was like, I don't want this guy getting hurt because I know he's taking care of his family, and he's kind of like family to me. So I think, we have to do something to help keep them safe, but it sounds like foundry owners are kind of doing that anyway.
Well, of course, Perry. I mean, nobody wants their team to get hurt and injured in their plant. Like, that's never the thing. It's never a dollar and cents. Right. I think what we're talking about is practical application of regulations. Let me give you an example just to set the field, right? Like, everybody's going to agree lockout tagout is an important rule because it saves lives. Machine guarding's got to be there so we don't have people that are getting nipped and rolled into machinery, right? So there's things that are well-meaning that are absolutely essential to protecting employees. But sometimes you get into an environment where you have some late-stage, well-meaning career regulators who've never really actually worked in industry in their life trying to regulate manufacturers. And I'll give you an example. The old silica standard that OSHA promulgated a couple years ago on respirable silica in the foundry, right? They changed the Pell calculation. They reduced the threshold, inserted a ton of requirements in terms of silica monitoring, demarcating zones, having silica control plans. Like, it was just a nasty regulation. And the fact is, the number of recordable cases of silicosis in this industry were, you could probably count them on one hand, and have been in a long-term trend for over 30 years. And this was not an inexpensive rule for foundries to try and do the required analysis and come into compliance with, again, a well-meaning regulation. But if anybody who actually worked in a foundry would tell you silicosis isn't an issue, or if we've seen it, it's been very rare. It certainly doesn't warrant, the benefit outweighs the cost tremendously. And I think that's where we've lost our guiding star, if you will, in Congress is, we can legislate everything to be perfectly safe, but nobody can operate. There's a welcome ground between, a perceived risk versus an actual risk, and giving people the autonomy and the ability to actually have some economic freedom and ability to manufacture the stuff that's important, not just for our consumer lives, right? But the Department of Defense and our military and our war fighters, all that stuff's got to be made by somebody. And if you tell foundries you can't use sand because you might have one case out of 300,000, and those aren't real numbers. Don't quote me on that. I don't need the statistic guys blowing up my email. But the risk is relatively low. The science proves it, right? So we have an expensive regulation that's well-meaning, but really is disconnected from the reality of the modern manufacturing foundry. And that's the stuff that we try and get in front of OSHA and EPA, right? And try and give them that guidance and that guiding star when they're developing the regulations so they can write it in as beneficial manner as they can to give foundries the freedom they need to operate, but still address their primary concerns in a reasonable manner using solid science, which is,
Yeah.
sometimes a challenge, honestly.
So are you working the flip side of that as well? Is there looking to reduce regulation or having to reduce regulation? Are you suggesting regulations that may not be viable or may not be all that great for the industry as things that they could look at reducing?
Well, if anybody cares enough, you know me, Perry. I've got an opinion or two. I think we could come up with a couple hundred of regulations that would deserve a second look. How about that?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Sure.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, like this heat rule that's still floating around out there, everybody agrees. I don't want guys having heat stroke out in the foundry. But man, we've been working around hot metal for hundreds of years. We know how to keep employees safe. We know how to cool them. We know what the thresholds are. For somebody who's never spent time in an operating foundry to dictate what a heat control plan looks like and what the personal protective equipment's got to be, I think is misguided. They certainly didn't take our comments and affect the regulation based on our written comments. So we're a little interested to see what the panel discussions look like. But we've not had a rash of cases that warrant raising it to a level of a regulation. Like,
Yeah, I mean, we try to keep our teammates safe as it is, as we've talked about in the past. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's things you can do, and like we talked about, I mean, sometimes you have to monitor yourself, but you also have to monitor your teammates as well and watch each other's backs. I mean, it just doesn't make sense otherwise. There's things you can do. You can pour more at night and move a lot of air. And the other thing about it is, some of these people that are making some of these regulations, they don't work in a foundry.
That's right.
They don't even go outside when it's hot, for God's sakes. They work in the air conditioning. So therefore, it's all seems like it's daunting. You can't survive in that environment without doing these X, Y, and Z, and it's just not realistic. For the fact that once you get acclimated to the heat and you sweat and you move enough air, you know what? Evaporative cooling is science. It works. Guess what? Your sweat will cool your body, and it's not as big of a deal as what people think. Sometimes that PPE becomes more of a hazard than what they're actually trying to resolve and fix and save and protect the employee and the teammate. Guess what? You're actually causing part of the problem. If you would open up some of the regulations, not to say that you got to protect people from molten metal and splash and all these other things that we want to prevent. We already do that. Right. So you guys are making us put additional PPE on people that is insane. It doesn't make any sense, and it's more dangerous than what we were doing before.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a good point there. You may have regulators that don't really understand the practical application of the regulations on the manufacturing community. But good gosh, look at the enforcement arm. When's the last time you had an OSHA inspector come through your foundry that actually understood your business and wasn't intimidated by the guys out on the foundry floor? I mean, I see more kids coming in on behalf of OSHA now that are intimidated by the shop floor. So they tend to do paperwork office visits, right? Versus actually going out and engaging with the guys on the foundry. And oftentimes they don't understand your equipment or your process. I think, I've heard stories of them taking video. They ask, but can I take video and show it back to my boss back in the office and tell if this is good or not? Because he has no idea. And I just saw a story maybe 2-3 months ago that OSHA's investigating buying their inspectors smart goggles that will have camera feed where they could have somebody back in the regional office watch that inspection in real time. So that's a real problem, right? As a regulator regulating something that they don't understand the downstream implications of, and an enforcement arm that's intimidated by your folks out on the floor and don't understand what they're looking at. What a recipe for nightmare.
Yeah, it's insanity is what it is. But what I can say is something that will speed the whole process up is to deck them out in all that PPE that they regulate that we should be wearing. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you go out there in the foundry on a hot summer day, and that inspection is going to go so quickly that it's not going to matter. I'm being a little facetious, but it's that silly. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard guys telling me, one guy in particular that worked foundry stuff his whole life, and he would just kind of laugh at some of the PPE, the spaceman suit as he would call it, right? The big silver thing with silver clothes with the silver helmet, and talk about how hard it was to move around in them and how unsafe it made people because their lack of mobility. And I just hearing you talk, I mean, could be the heat stroke because there's not ventilating in those things.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to wear those. You're going to wear those items when you need to wear them. I mean, obviously, our guys that are grabbing ceramic shells out of a kiln and you got that radiant heat. You're already protecting your teammates because it's the safe thing to do. But you don't necessarily need to wear the spacesuit when you're out there making a mold, or just because you're in the general vicinity of the metal where they're pouring. Maybe the molding machine's in earshot distance of that. Well, do you have to wear all the same safety equipment just because you're in the general vicinity or you're walking by? No.
Yeah.
I mean, let's use some common sense, and common sense isn't as common as it used to be in DC and state regulations. I mean, it applies as well. So it can be very frustrating. But again, that's why it's so vital for us as foundry people, and it doesn't even have to be the owners, and it can be somebody on the team that is passionate about those sort of things. Give them the opportunity to get on a plane and go to DC or go to the state capitol and get in front of those guys and make your voice heard. Don't sit there and complain about it if you don't actually put your money where your mouth is at and protect the foundation of the foundry industry and your company and your employees and your teammates. Just sit down and shut up if you're not gonna put your money where your mouth is. And a lot of people in this foundry industry, they do exactly that, which is a sad state of affairs.
So I'm gonna open up. This may be a huge can of worms, and who knows what I'm going to hear next. But I read a book recently, and I wish I could remember the author and the title, but it was written by a judge, Supreme Court judge out of Colorado, that wrote a book on the effects of agency regulation on business. And he was really pointing out the fact that a bunch of NGOs, I mean, NGOs are big in the news, right? These non-government organizations essentially creating laws that companies have to deal with that are so burdensome that they can't even do business. And he cited a number of examples. When you guys talk about going back and talking to your government guys, your congressman or their aides or whatever, if you listen to his book, he will tell you that they don't have any power over these agencies, and that the agencies are basically just making rules that suddenly you've got to live by. Are you finding that kind of thing too when you're talking to these guys, or are you focusing pretty much on the government employees as opposed to the non-government employees?
Well, regulators are going to regulate, right? That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Lawmakers are going to make laws. That's what they do. So the lawmakers have given OSHA, let's pick on OSHA because they're my favorite target, my favorite victim, is charged with occupational safety and health.
So is OSHA a NGO?
No, OSHA is a subset.
Are they part of the Department of Labor or something?
Right. They're within the Department of Labor. But the reason I bring up OSHA is they will oftentimes incorporate what are known as reference standards. For example, in the electrical safety standard, they'll often refer to NFPA standards for things like combustible dust and arc flash. And those things get incorporated in and can be used as the basis for a 5A1 general duty clause citation that was never cleared by Congress, right? It was never written as a regulation. It was just an incorporated standard. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, this guy would talk about local agencies coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example. One example from the book. There was a Hemingway's house somewhere in Florida. I don't remember where in Florida it was. Hemingway's house. And somebody came in from one of these agencies and saw there was a cat there at this house that had 6 toes. And they decided that this cat had to be protected. And so they made the caretakers of this, I guess it was really kind of a museum, build special walls so the cat could not escape. They had to provide other kinds of things. And then they found out that there were more cats. And then they decided, well, you have to protect all these. You have to put them in cages at night. You have to do, and they just started making all these rules that this museum just couldn't handle the fact there was some cat running around with 6 toes and they had, but suddenly they were burdened by all of this regulation. And the moral to this, or the ending story for a lot of these things was, and there's no place you can go because these agencies have their own judicial system. If you violate one of their rules, you go to one of their judges and you plead your case in front of one of their judges, not in front of someone from the judicial branch of our government, part of that agency. And so that's why I'm wondering if you guys are running into that kind of stuff. I mean, granted, you're not running into six-toed cats, but people creating regulations for the industry that aren't really answerable to anybody.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the argument is made that the agency was established under an act of Congress and they have the responsibility and the authority to regulate those industries. All we're arguing is that, they need to use some practicality in their decision making and actually use science and data that's meaningful. If you look at a trend chart and see a declining incidence down to almost nothing over a 30-year trend, is that really the right time to write a new regulation to regulate something that's clearly not
moving in the right direction already, right?
Not compared to other risk profiles that the data would show. Right. So what's driving that effort? Again, I think everybody in OSHA is trying to do what they think right and trying to protect workers. And I commend them for that effort. The problem is it's a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and they're trying to solve a problem that really maybe doesn't exist.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. In one of the times that I was in DC, somebody was talking about, it was actually a former employee or administrator, executive director, or somebody of the EPA, and they were telling us that in the history of documentation of clean water and clean air and that sort of thing, and this was probably 15 years ago, that the records show that we've got the cleanest air that we've ever had in recorded history. We've got the cleanest drinking water in recorded history. And but the regulations, I mean, the Clean Air Act and that sort of stuff that was all kind of happening in that time period. This was somebody that was actually in that organization, the EPA. And they're like, we just end up regulating ourselves into a corner, and it doesn't always make sense. And he was commending everybody that was there for governmental affairs. You guys are doing the right thing. Keep showing up. Keep making your voices heard. Because if you don't, the organization that I was part of for so long is going to continue to do what they do, which is, hey, the air, your air permits and all that other stuff, they're doing such a good job at the levels that they're at now. They can actually do better. Let's ratchet that thing down and get the parts per million cut in half again, because they're so good at what they're doing. But in the whole process, we don't necessarily need to do that, because what good does it do? The amount of money that it's going to take for us to actually get that, and even it may not even be attainable with no matter amount of money that we can put at it. So why would we do that? Well, it's like because they feel like they have to do something, or they're not justifying their existence, which I would have to agree.
Yeah, and so the other thing to remember here too is, even though they're operating within their own assigned responsibilities, I still think there has to be some higher level oversight, right? To understand that these are all cumulative costs. And every time we issue a regulation that requires a foundry to do something, we've added on just one more little bit of overhead cost. And in a globalized economy, we're competing against foundries in Canada and Mexico and Brazil and Korea and India and Vietnam, right? So we're competing on a truly international border basis, and every time you increase my operating cost a half a point, my operating competitive advantage is reduced by a half a point. And so when I'm trying to bid against other countries that don't have a silica standard or don't have a heat rule, right? Those companies aren't carrying the cost, and all you've done is take our domestic manufacturers and make them less competitive versus international competitors. So you take tariffs, right? So here's the crazy thing about tariffs is nobody in the United States, one plant makes primary aluminum, right? There's just maybe one, maybe two copper mills in the US left. We import 90% of that stuff, right? So by slapping a 10 or a 25 or a 50 or 100 or 300% tariff, whatever the whim may be that day, all you've done is put a 300% tax on the raw material cost for American foundries. Guess who don't have to pay those? Aluminum foundries in Canada ain't paying the 25% aluminum tariffs. Now, I take the dollar denominations out aside, they've got a $25 or a 25% cost advantage over me, all other things being competitive. How is that pro-American? That to me sounds anti-American. And I don't hate tariffs. I kind of think that somebody need to talk about this. I think the problem is that we've haphazardly applied tariffs across the board instead of being strategic. I think it's time we start to get a little bit more strategic, protect our American industries that are actually important for things like, defense, national security, potable water, food supply, and let's put tariffs on things like imported castings. Right? That's a much better strategy to protect the aluminum foundries instead of making them eat a 25% tariff and try to outcompete the Canadians or the Mexicans or anybody else on efficiency gains. Like what a nightmare, right? So let's get rid of the raw materials. I get the whole point is to open up the mills. But man, all you're doing is putting the weight of that on the back of the foundry industry. And most of these are small family-owned businesses, right? These aren't Alcoas populating the industry. Those are the big dogs. We're talking the 50-man foundry in Buffalo and the 40-man shop in Cleveland. Those are the guys that are eating the brunt of this. And so you can tell you struck a nerve here, Perry, because I'm a little passionate about this. I'd like to see some strategy applied and take the weight off of our brothers and sisters working as small business. We can be smarter.
Yeah, I agree. I think that being targeted is probably the way to go to apply some thought into where these things are going. Great. I mean, great stuff. I think that I don't know where we're headed. I mean, I am the last guy to know where we're headed with these things, but I mean, it just seems like, they were sort of thrown out there in a blanket approach, and for other reasons. I feel like this sort of blanketed tariff thing was, I want to get people to the table and start talking, and I'm going to slap this big thing on you and scare you and make you come in.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to have been effective in that regard. And also it appears that there is some thought going into, well, does it make sense to do this? Right? Because you keep seeing these, the pausing. I'm looking at the market today. The market's happy today because there's a pause on one of the tariff things. Tomorrow they'll be mad because, chickens in Uzbekistan aren't laying eggs, but today the market is happy because there's a pause as they reevaluate, what do we need to be putting tariffs on? And hopefully it just, what we end up doing is creating a fair, even environment. I agree with you. I mean, slapping a tariff on a product that we don't produce, like raw materials like aluminum or copper, seems counterproductive. It really does. And I don't know. Does the U.S. assume the U.S. has those resources? I don't know. Do we have places where we can mine copper? Do we have places where we can mine aluminum or alum or whatever it is that comes into aluminum? Do we have the facilities, or did we have the facilities to actually create the ingots that need to be used? I mean, Perry doesn't know, but
Well, I
It seems
think
like that would
that's
be an
kind of the
expensive
effect
thing.
of where we're at, Harry. The fact is, we
Yeah.
only have one smelter in the country because we couldn't be competitive because you have external players, China, a place subliminal man, right, was dumping product onto the market at less than the cost of production because they have government subsidies on their stuff. Like, I'm not the world export on aluminum here, right? But we all know that they were dumping product in, and I think that that's part of what the administration is trying to address is to stop the Chinese from over dumping to provide some space for domestic manufacturers to stand up, and it might even be working, right? I'm not a totally negative guy. I think I
Yeah.
just saw a deal that the UAE was going to build a new aluminum smelting plant down in Oklahoma someplace, which is really interesting. I mean, if that's true, that's really exciting. I'm not sure what they're going to use to generate electricity down there, if they're going to burn the tears of liberals or exactly what they're funding their electricity with. But there's no hydroelectric power down there, so it's real interesting to see what the plans will be. More to come.
Yeah, it'd be hard for them to compete with the Canadians in the aluminum production, especially since they have the bauxite mines right there, and then the power and everything
Right.
else. So there's some documentaries on Alcoa and all that sort of stuff, which are extremely fascinating if you're have time to watch that sort of thing. But because they've done it right, they have the electricity, because it takes a tremendous amount of electricity to take bauxite and turn it into aluminum. So yeah, it'll be short of using recycled products and things of that nature. I don't know how they're going to do that, because I don't know where they're going to get the bauxite from in Oklahoma.
Well, if we're fortunate enough to have anybody in the sphere of influence that makes policy on tariffs, let's just stick a little note to them that if you really want to be effective, start banning the export of aluminum scrap. Let's start there. It's 90% energy to smelt that down from bauxite, right?
Sure.
So we keep that energy here. That's a net energy export when you start shipping aluminum scrap. I'm sure, all my aluminum traders are going to not appreciate that, but it strikes me that if it's so energy intensive, let's not ship that energy offshore.
Yeah, it stands to reason. I was curious, have you ever, because this has always been a wonder or a head scratcher for me, is how in the world are these foreign competitors, India, China, I've seen pricing that is just makes my head just flip the lid off of my head, for the fact that some of the pricing is ridiculous. I mean, China will quote something that's half the price of what India quotes. And then when I look at what it's actually going to cost us to do it here, we're like twice as expensive as what India is selling the castings here in the U.S. Gone through all the imports, tariffs, all that other stuff. I'm just sitting there thinking, how in the world can those pricing? How can that even be that way? And I take a step back and I think, well, I can't hardly fault any of those companies for buying that material, the product, when they can get it for that price, for 25% of the price. But I've never in my mind figured out how in the world they're able to do that, even if you take out, even the labor, take the labor out of it, it still seems completely backwards and upside down. It's almost as if those companies are being subsidized somehow by the government. But I don't know how their tax system works or anything else. So, I always scratch my head thinking, how in God's name does this actually work? And it's next to impossible for us to stay competitive against those guys. Fortunately, we can find niche markets where we can beat them on delivery. We can beat them on specific alloys and things of that nature. So you really have to think outside the box when it comes to that. But if you're just wanting to try to beat them on sheer volume for standard regular old cookie cutter alloys, that's a tall order that's probably not going to be overcome very easily. Have you ever had anybody kind of explain that to you as how that can be?
Well, Nate, I that's a great point. I think that there's a lot of different pieces going on here. Part of it is raw material costs, right? And if you don't have tariffs on your incoming raw material, or you have a domestic supply, now we've got a cost advantage. But we talked about regulations and death by 1,000 cuts, right? Think of the amount of money that your foundry alone has to pay just to comply with the different rules and regulations. Do you think a guy running a small aluminum foundry in Sichuan is really all that concerned about how many different lockout, tagout devices he has hanging, or that he's done medical surveillance for silicosis? No, they don't carry any of that cost. cost. So they've got a direct, you know, decisive lead over me just in terms of regulatory and overhead compliance. Their tax structure is completely different. You're paying guys, China's not much. It's not 20 years ago, right? They're not paying guys $1 a day. Their labor costs have gone up as their population has aged, and that's why you're seeing capital flight to places like Vietnam and India, quite frankly. But what they do is they use jobs as a political tool in China, right? So they'll sell products at a loss to keep people employed. And let's face it, if you look at demographics, there's an interesting guy named Peter Zeihan on YouTube, and he talks about demographics, and part of the thing going on in China is China has more people over the age of 60 than they do under the age of 30. Right. And who does most of the consumption in an economy? It's the young people. So his argument, it's not mine, his argument is China it has too much capacity and not enough young people to form the consumption basis. So they have to dump product into the world market at a subsidized rate. And the whole point is, look, if we're going to be self-sufficient, we have to be able to make stuff ourselves to support our defense industrial base. We can't plan to get that from China forever if we're going to have a potential conflict with China at some point in the future. And they're just not going to be a viable partner looking long term. I think everybody recognizes that 30 years from now, China as an independent trading partner is not going to be where it is now. That's why we're looking to reshore now. So there's a whole host of facts, Nate, back to your point. It's not just overhead and labor costs, it's raw material costs, it's access to markets, it's tariffs. There's a lot of pieces that go in there, but American foundries are not the cheapest guys on the market, nor are we trying to be. Right? The high volume, low integrity, low engineering stuff, your margin's going to be made on my labor cost is lower than your labor costs, right? But a lot of American foundry manufacturing is a little bit more highly engineered, custom manufactured component. It's not 300,000 units, it's 300 part run. Right. So I think that we're more value added here in the US, and we need to continue to leverage our strengths, which is that efficiency, that high quality, that engineered and added value that we can bring in terms of machining and assembly and all the other great stuff. There's always going to be guys that buy on price out there, but I'll put American foundries and their American industry up against anybody. And if given a level playing field, that's all we want, right? Is I don't want that guy to have more of an advantage than what I got, and we'll compete on the open market all day long. That's where we need to get to in terms of American policy. It's just an even playing field, so I'm not playing with a 25% noose hanging around my neck.
Yeah, it's been this way for most of my career. Or at least since I've been paying attention anyway, because I can remember 20, 25 years ago when I worked in Oklahoma. I mean, it was just one of those things where, we just need a level playing field, and we just need a level playing field. And you think you're making some headway, but here we are in 2025, and we're kind of talking about the same crap over and over again. It's like, damn, at what point are we gonna get a level playing field? Because I guarantee you the USA can kick the crap out of just about anybody when it comes to innovation, efficiency, and just downright getting it done.
Mm-hmm.
I put money on it any day of the week. But when you see the handicap that we have in the foundry industry when we're dealing with that, and not just that, but it seems completely crazy to me that some of these corporations, publicly traded companies and all this other stuff, I know that they get pressure from stockholders and all that sort of stuff. Why in God's name they would send their intellectual properties over to China knowing full well they're going to steal whatever that intellectual property is, because they don't invent jack crap.
Absolutely.
They don't invent anything. All they do is steal all of the intelligence that comes from not just the United States, from Europe and Britain and everywhere else that innovates and is smart and really gets in there and figures things out. What are they doing? They're just waiting in the wing for somebody to send their stuff over there so they can just rip it off, which is disheartening. And I can't imagine why anybody would do that except for the almighty dollar and the pressure from shareholders. That's the only thing that makes any sense in my regard, at least from my perspective.
We've seen 30 years of corporate greed supersede the need to support American manufacturers and American consumers. That's why you've seen an evaporation of what used to be considered a middle class, right? And it's not even really that anymore. It's people who are normal and people that have $1 billion. We've spent 30 years chasing profits by moving jobs overseas, and we've failed to recognize what's happened in Ohio, in Indiana, in Wisconsin, and the families that leaned on manufacturing jobs to support a family. It was not too long ago. You could have a job in a manufacturing plant and support a wife and a couple of kids at home while your wife stayed at home. And about the time we started chasing dollars by using cheaper labor, we gutted the middle class, the normal families in this country. And I think that was a huge policy mistake. I'd love to see that manufacturing industry brought back, revitalized. Let's face it, not every kid's cut out for college, and certainly not at $200,000 to $300,000 bill before they ever start their career. I mean, I don't have children, but if I had a kid, my first advice would be, man, you should be looking at a trade like welding, machining, is something with your hands that's not going to get replaced by AI, and you don't have a $300,000 mortgage to pay off at the start of your career. That's the path to success for kids. I'm more convinced than ever.
Yeah, for sure. And not just that, but I mean, and again, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Some people just plug in better. They're not built for the stress. They're not built for the forward thinking and everything else. They just want to show up. They want to do a job. They want to do a solid job. And guess what? As entrepreneurs, we need those individuals really bad. So it's not a bad thing. It's a marriage made in heaven, and that's what makes a good team. It's finding those individuals that really plug into those key positions. And but put that aside, this country is the most blessed country as far as if you have a little bit of gumption and you want to wake up early and you want to go get after it. There's no reason why somebody can't make a good living going and buying some lawnmowers and weed eaters and going and knocking on doors and getting after it. Get some business cards printed at the local print shop, and you're well on your way. Guess what? There's nobody stopping you from doing any of that.
All right. You know what? Those kids, he knocks on my door, I'm going to offer him a job. They got gumption. They got
100%.
I'll tell you how old I am. We used to call it grit or moxie back in the day, right? The kids got ambition. Like, that's who we ought to be looking to bring into the foundry. You only love what you know, right? If you don't know
Yep.
that you can be successful in life, that there's a meaningful career that's rewarding in manufacturing, how do you ever end up there? So I think that's part of it, is we just have to continue our jobs as foundry industry leaders to better engage with our community and the next generation and show them how vibrant foundry work is, the tremendous career path and career potential that's available in this industry. And it doesn't require a $300,000 check to play in the game.
I
Like
agree.
the most important skill for any kids that are listening out right now, be willing to show up, man. That's the best thing you can do. If you can be dependable and show up every day, you may not know the answer, you may not get it right every time, but a commitment to show up and to do the best job you possibly can will carry you miles, whether it's in the foundry industry or whatever industry you end up. You just got to show up, and you got to be engaged, and you got to love what you do. And I think that's where most
Yeah, for
foundry guys
sure.
end up.
And on that note, interfacing and getting part involvement with the community and things like that. I was in Indiana this week, and I've got to give kudos to Hoosier Pattern for that regard, because those guys, they interface with the community. Here they've got an iron pour that they're going to do it in, I think, 3 weeks. They've got 3D printed molds that the local second, third, fourth graders are doing. They're doing scratch molds and that sort of thing. They're going to do the pour in the evening, that sort of thing. Getting the whole community of Decatur involved and
It's
local other communities, outstanding. Kudos to those guys, because Keith and those guys, they're the whole team there at Hoosier. Very forward thinking. They've got a cupola they're going to be running and pouring iron, and they do it in the evening, so that next thing you know, you've got this big show that's fire, and they're pouring molten metal and everything. There's nothing more impressive than that. So I think that a lot of us in the foundry industry as leaders, if we want to promote what we're doing and get some excitement with the community, because we do need to fill those positions. There's no doubt in my mind that if we don't go out there and tell people and beat the drum, and get involved with the kids, even in grade school, they're not even ready to be an employee of a foundry. But guess what? You go to a grade school and you get a hold of Kent Kent State University and you get you a foundry in the box and you take that and you go and get those kids involved with that. Not only that, but getting Foundry in a box. It's not a lot of money, guys. Spend the money on it. Go get a hold of those guys. Get a hold of Trent True, which is the advisor at Kent State University for Foundry in a box. It's like $1,360. You get everything that you need for Foundry in a box that you can actually go to the local elementary school, the middle school, the high school. Get involved with the community. Go do it for the Chamber of Commerce, and you know how excited those people will get that they get to mold and make their own casting, pour something. They get to take that little rascal home. That's something that's going to be a memory that some of those kids will take all the way the rest of their lives. And when they graduate, they think, man, that was pretty cool back then. Maybe I want to do something like that. But if we don't encourage that and we don't get excited about it ourselves, you're going to see this industry just completely buckle and fold as we've kind of have seen it happening over the last 20, 25 years. I've seen more foundries close down. And I would love to get the statistic on how many foundries are actually open today compared to what they used to be, because even 20, 25 years ago when I actually started paying attention, I mean, the amount of foundries was dismal. Seemed like there was over 5,000 of them that had to close down and just evaporated and gone.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things. And the other thing about it is, guys, the Foundry in a box and getting it from Kent State University, getting a hold of Trent True.
Mhm.
It's not much money. And the fun thing about it is, guess what? Your customers, you do a lunch and learn with your customers, you go to their facility and you do a lunch and learn with them and you get them involved and that relationship you're going to build with those customers. I can't tell you how excited some of those people are. They don't get to see that sort of thing. It's like a field trip at work for them. And you want to think that they don't know where those castings come from. They just know that they call you and they need to order it and they get it. Well, if they get to see the whole process right there at their facility, it doesn't cost anything for your time to speak of. Yeah, you got to get out of the office or whatever, but you know what? Super fun. Practice it. Do it for your own employees. Have them go through it. Bring their families and their kids in. Buy dinner, buy pizza, and have them come do it at your facility. Practice it, and then get out there in front of those other customers and get some excitement about it from them. It's going to build a deeper and more precious relationship with those customers. I can't encourage you enough. I'm going to do it, and I've already got 2 or 3 customers lined out that we're going to do lunch and learn with them. They're excited about it, and get a hold of the Chamber of Commerce and that sort of thing in the community. Do an open house. And again, I hate to, I'm not promoting Hoosier by any means, but I guess I kind of am, because I'm waving the banner because Keith and those guys there getting involved with the community. It's pretty exciting to see somebody that's doing that in their industry. They're promoting Foundry. They're promoting them. They're promoting the business and the technology that they have and the CNC machines and everything that they do for the industry. It's kind of a flagship, if you ask me, because I don't see a lot of other people doing that.
Mhm. You mentioned you had Chris Greenfield on a previous episode of your Foundry Talk podcast. And I love Chris. Chris said something meaningful to me once, earlier in my career, and I've never forgot the advice. He says, Jerrod, it's not enough to do good things. You have to be caught doing good things. And that phrase comes to mind here. You have to be your own best advocate for your business and your local community. You have to engage with the young and upcoming kids. Let's face it, all hiring's local, right? We're going to hire somebody within 20 to 30 miles of my plant because they have to be able to drive there and have time to get there after they drop the kids off at school or whatever the case may be. So all hiring is local. You have to engage with the local population, but you can't stop there. You have to engage with your customers. You have to engage with your legislators and your regulators. Have them come to your plant. Take them on a tour. Help them understand that this isn't a dirty smokestack kind of industry, which is what all the video footage from the 1920s shows, right? American foundries are vibrant and they're modern, full of technology and just modernness. And they don't understand that. So really be your own advocate and be your own success story. Communicate with your industry, engage with the industry leaders in your community, form those partnerships, talk with the school, work with the chamber. Nobody's going to do it as good as you can. You have to be caught doing good things.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Wow, look at that. Consensus.
Yeah. Hey,
Well, I don't
I don't have a
agree.
gavel, but if I did, I would hit it.
I don't agree.
Get the man a
I'm not
gavel,
gonna say
Perry.
anything.
Let's go.
Yeah, Perry, where's my gavel at, man?
There we go. There you go.
Well, I think this has been outstanding. Jerrod, we appreciate you coming on the podcast. I can't imagine us not being able to do this, once a quarter or something like that. Try to get back on and at least keep everybody up informed. I think it's great information. Things are changing all the time, especially in the political climate and the global climate for that matter, with the tariffs and everything else that's going on in the world. So I think that and thank you for taking the time to come out and link up with us and do this podcast again. I think it's really key. It's vital. The next time we have this podcast, I'm going to give you a report on how my Foundry in the Box is doing, how it's done with the customers, and how many kids we may have affected along the way.
Well, that's great, and kudos to you, gentlemen, for opening up an environment where we can just talk shop in a unfiltered and an unscheduled format, and kind of just riff on the thoughts at hand. That's where some of the best conversation evolves. So keep up the good work you're doing, and looking forward to the next chance we have to speak together.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will be back in touch. I'm sure we'll get desperate again, Jerrod, and we'll be back in touch. So,
Well, if just start behaving better, gentlemen, you'll find a better class of interviews.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll change our stripes.
What are you saying about the people that we've already interviewed that you don't even know about yet, huh? What about that, Jerrod?
Hey, man, it's a spectrum. You can have Chris Greenfield on. He's a lovely man. I think he's awfully intelligent. But you got stuck with me for a second time. So
I know. But I think that we're
peaks and
privileged
valleys.
to have you on for a second time. So
that's really nice of you, Nate. I appreciate it. And you guys are just great. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. Have a good